Ottawa's new envoy in New York City, who works to promote cultural and economic ties between the U.S. and Canada, paid a visit to the North Country this week. And we are pleased this week to welcome Canada's Consul General in New York, Thom Hallock, who paid a visit this week to the North Country and met with community leaders and business leaders. Welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
It is a delight to be here. It really is.
Thank you. You are a familiar face to millions of TV viewers across Canada, and one of the country's most respected broadcast journalists for 45 years. At CTV for many years, bureau chief in Washington and Beijing, then Global News. So you must feel right at home here in the studio.
I was going to say, this is, I love what you've done with the place. This is really home for me. 45 years I spent in studios and in front of cameras all over the world.
Most recently, you served as chair of a PR firm advising businesses on public policy issues. Mm-hmm. This is your first visit to the North Country?
It's my second, actually. I've been up in, I've been up in Albany, but not in the North Country. Let me make that distinction. I've been upstate, but this is the first time in the North Country.
And you mentioned that. You met with the North Country Assemblyman Billy Jones and state legislators down in Albany a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
The New York-Canada Relations Task Force was created by the Assembly this past year, first of its kind in the U.S. Assemblyman Jones was appointed chair of that task force, and he says the members are planning trips to both Toronto and Quebec City this summer. And in a statement, he said that the North Country has such a special relationship with our northern neighbors. Between the billions of dollars in trade and the many Canadian tourists we see each year, New York has a great relationship with Canada, and it's important to continue to foster this friendship. And you probably feel much the same.
I do, and the amazing thing for me, I'm new to the job, I'm new to the North Country, but I'm not new to the issues around Canada-US. I've been studying it all my life. There is no other group of people anywhere in the United States or Canada that understand the relationship and live the relationship more than the people in the North Country do. And I'm not saying that just to blow some smoke. It is absolutely true that if you wanted to look for that one great example of how the relationship between two countries can be and can be beneficial for both, look no farther than the North Country, because it happens here. And it's not just one way, right? It's two way. And so what I like to do, and what I've said this in Washington, I've said this in other parts of my territory, is I said, take a look at what's happening in upstate New York. Take a look at the North Country, because this is the model for what I think all of us who are involved in this business really want to achieve, and it's here.
There are some trade issues between the U.S. and Canada, dairy and timber. I think there will always be trade issues. But what you're talking about, the core, the U.S. and Canada have such a strong relationship, such a strong bond.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about there being issues. I'd be worried, in fact, if there weren't issues. We are two sovereign countries. We have two different histories. But I think that the issues that you mentioned are, they've been with us for some time, and I suspect that they're going to be with us for some time to come. But the key of it all is, and I truly believe this, I've spent most of my life traveling the world, and there are not two countries in the world who share a border who wouldn't in a nanosecond trade places with us. They would love to have the problems we have. They would love to have the border we've got. They would love to have the interdependency. But to Billy's point is that you can never take this stuff for granted. You've got to nurture it, you've got to keep up the relationships, and you got to keep up the conversations. So that's primarily what my job is.
Being in New York, you no doubt have been part of the new partnership between Quebec and New York State, a new multi-billion-dollar deal over 25 years to bring hydropower from Quebec across the border to New York City, working to get that cable buried in Lake Champlain in the coming months, and the Hudson River, deliver that electricity to New York City to help power more than 1 million homes. That's quite a deal.
It is, and it is really, I think, a landmark deal, not only because it is such a huge project, which it really is, and it's going to benefit both countries, all that sort of stuff. But it's an eye into the future. I mean, our future is based on where can I get green power? Where can I get renewable energy? And New York City is going to come on. The lights of Broadway now are going to be powered by green, renewable energy. 20% of New York City's power is going to be green and renewable. I mean, this is, if you think about it, it's just a huge advance, not just for us, not just for New York City, but really as an example to everybody else. This can be done. I think this is not going to be the only one that we're going to see. We're going to see a lot more of this.
There is a strong tie between Quebec and northern New York. This area has become a major manufacturing hub for transportation equipment. Canadian companies setting up manufacturing assembly plants here in Plattsburgh to build rail and subway cars, and in more recent years, buses. Lots of folks were stunned by the announcement by Nova Bus 2 weeks ago that it was shutting down its plant here in Plattsburgh and moving its operations back to Quebec. About 350 jobs are going to be lost when the factory closes. Even more potentially the supply chain companies around in the area that help supply Nova Bus. Was the decision by Volvo to do this a shock to you as well, or did you have some indication that this was going to happen?
We had no more indication than you did here in Plattsburgh. It is, at the end of the day, it's a commercial decision taken by a private company who decided that their future had to have a certain shape to it and that it couldn't include this operation anymore. It's so awful when companies either retract or fail, and I've been talking to some officials here today about this, is that there's tremendous interest that has been expressed in the Nova Bus facilities, that in fact buses may be built there again very, very soon. I don't want to get ahead of any announcement, but I think that the example is that one blow like that doesn't have to mean a continuing problem for the area. My position would be right now is that, look, fingers crossed, let's hope this works. And if it does, we're going to be the first ones to cheer.
Tourism, of course, is such a major economic driver here in northern New York. The region and businesses count on Canadians, and the number of visitors has rebounded after the pandemic back to about 90% of what it was. Community and business leaders are hopeful that the U.S. and Canada will get back on the same page with their border policies to try to make it as easy as possible for people to pass on both sides.
Right.
They'd like to get back there. During the pandemic, everybody had different regulations. Most of those have been lifted, but they don't feel there's that flow between the border right now. Do you hear that?
I spent today up at the border speaking both to the Canadians on the Canadian side and the Americans on the American side. This is a border that works terrifically well. Are there problems? Of course, you know, every border crossing is going to have a problem, and there are, you know, we can always do better. This is now the time where we should look at our systems, and we should look at what technology can do to help us move things along.
Northern New York is unhappy that Amtrak has suspended passenger rail service again between New York City and Montreal. New restrictions on tracks north of the border by Canadian National Railway led to Amtrak suspending the train between Albany and Montreal, including Plattsburgh. Have you or your office been contacted, and is there anything you're doing or that the federal government in Ottawa can do to try to step in and help mediate this?
The reality is that we're dealing with two private companies. We're dealing with Amtrak and we're dealing with Canadian National. It would be a mistake, in my mind, for any government to interfere with what is a commercial dispute between two companies. It is for them to work it out. You know, can we encourage them to do that? Yes. You know, get on with it. But ultimately, it is up to them. There's no government role in this. No, we don't have any jurisdiction. We don't have anything to do with this. So we really hope it gets solved sooner as opposed to later.
You're based in New York City and no doubt have seen firsthand the smoke and haze that's drifted down from Canada. It's been a tough few months in Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Ontario. The wildfires that have been burning, some of the worst in northern Quebec, where about 150 fires are still burning. The Canadian government warning this past week that with the hot, stormy weather forecasted The fires and fire danger may continue well into August and September, which could bring more smoke and haze across the border to U.S. cities. Governor Kathy Hochul did reach out to you and offered New York State DEC forest rangers and firefighters who did travel to Nova Scotia and Quebec to help fight those fires. But this must be putting a strain on the provinces and the federal government dealing with this. This is unprecedented.
It is. It is unprecedented. In fact, the numbers are staggering. In terms of just June alone, the number of forest fires that were burning in Canada were 14,000% higher than normal. 14,000%. It's a combination of all sorts of things, but under one title, climate change. Look, those forests are dry. We are not getting the rain that we normally get. Temperatures are high, which is very unusual for the north. We've had temperatures up in the Arctic of like 90 degrees in the Arctic. I mean, what is going on? So that's problem. Number one, Governor Hochul reached out to me. We had a wonderful conversation. New York couldn't have been, and she could not have been more helpful and more understanding, and we truly appreciate the help that we're getting from New Yorkers. So, you know, we're getting the love, and we truly appreciate it. I just want everybody to understand one thing about the forest fires, though, and because it's a legitimate question. Why this stuff still burning? Why haven't you put the fires out yet? Main reason is that when you take a look at where those fires are burning, some of them are in such remote areas, hundreds and hundreds of miles away from any civilization, from any people. There's no infrastructure, there's no roads, there's no place to land people. You gotta let it burn. I mean, as awful as that sounds, there's really no other way of doing it. You've got to concentrate your efforts on fighting the fires that are encroaching on human habitation, towns, villages, infrastructure, those sort of things. You've got to protect people. So when you say that, yeah, you know, this thing could burn until August, look, this thing could burn until winter is the reality. What we've got to do is get a lot of rain. Maybe some of the rain that fell here in the last couple of days.
We've had quite a bit. I don't know
if it up north.
If it's been reaching that far up into Quebec, but yeah, it's going to take rain. It will take time to play out.
It will take time to play out, and it's all about the winds right now. If the winds are blowing the right way, you're not going to get the smoke. If the winds back and turn, it is going to blow it this way again. But we're feeling it in Canada just as much, if not more so, than anybody down here. Our capital city of Ottawa has been under almost a constant pail of smoke for over a month now.
Thom Clark, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and see us. We appreciate it.
It was a real pleasure, and I thank you.